Hey guys, what's up? So I'm sitting here on my side porch doing something that I've wanted to do for a very long time and only just recently got the chance to start. I have always wanted to get a chance if I could somehow ask people, experts in martial arts for their opinions on the arts that they train in, where they think it's headed, and how they feel, it should improve or their own particular opinions on its development. Like I've always wanted to be able to find the time or find some way to interview experts who have experience and have some idea of what they're talking about or have some experience in the art itself and maybe have opinions that you may not have heard or certain perspectives that you may not expect. And I finally got the chance to do just that, and I got to do it with someone who I definitely wasn't expecting, but I am really glad that they decided to give me the opportunity. So today, as you can probably tell by the title, I'm actually going to be interviewing Scott Rodell, and I'm pretty sure many of you guys have heard of that name. He has been teaching and practicing Chinese martial arts, particularly Tai Chi Chuan and the Chinese sword, for quite some time now. And today I actually have him on to, give his perspectives on Chinese martial arts, swordsmanship, and his experience in that particular field. So let's welcome Scott Rodell. How are you doing, sir?
Very well, thank you, and thank you for this opportunity to talk to so many people and get to meet you and know you a little bit as well.
Thanks, I really appreciate it. So I'm just going to just jump into this right away. I mean, even though this is an interview and I'm the one asking the questions, and I'm just going to say right off the bat, this is going to be a somewhat informal interview. I do have my questions, that I want to ask you prepared and all that, but I'm also somebody who hates when the interviewer tries to lead the show instead of the interviewee, because we're here to hear the interviewee. So even though I'm going to be asking the questions, I'm definitely going to be giving you the floor to explain your views, and we'll just kind of go along from there. So at this point, instead of me introducing you and talking about your qualifications or your experience, how about you tell us, just give us an introduction on who you are and basically what your career is.
Great, great. Well, I'd be happy to. I started training when I was 9 years old. So I guess you could say that's when I started formally training. I was one of those kids who was always running around the backyard with a stick trying to get other kids to have a sword fight with me. So I might have started a little younger, but at 9 I started my formal training in martial arts, and I started with just the local martial arts school back in New Jersey where I was from. And it was what we would call an MMA school now, so I guess they were really ahead of their time back in the 60s. And we mostly learned judo and a lot of throws, hip throws kind of things, takedowns, and karate and things like that. But they used boxing and sabat and other arts mixed together. And so it was sort of very practically oriented. And I just kind of kept on going over the decades. Through high school, I was a wrestler. I really enjoyed wrestling. And I also always enjoyed different weapons. I practiced archery of different types. I done some shooting with firearms, never big into firearms. It's kind of an expensive hobby, but whenever I would travel to a seminar, if students, especially out west, said, "You want to go to the range?" I was like, "Yeah, let's go, try something new." Had a chance to do a little horseback archery, which was really a lot of fun, but living in suburbia, it's not something I could really pursue, but it's great to get that experience. In college, I kind of found that I sort of was between things. I had finished wrestling and didn't really know what I was going to do. Kind of felt something was missing in life, and it dawned on me, man, I've been like always training in one martial art or another. I hadn't really thought about it before. Excuse me. I just kept doing it. I wasn't really thinking about things. So I just jumped in and kept going. And a friend told me about Robert Smith, who was one of Chen Manjing's senior students, and this Tai Chi Chuan stuff. And I went and thought, oh, let me go check it out. And I remember one day I saw myself in the mirror and I thought, years and years of wrestlers, of course, years and years and years I had that cross in my stomach from a gazillion sit-ups. And I thought, it's pretty good. And they came along and said, oh, this is really bad, you're too hard. It's like, what are you talking about? You know how many sit-ups this is? You know? And so it took me a while to get it, because Tai Chi Chuan is really different. But over time, I was able, because Robert Smith was a guy who was studying Tai Chi Chuan really early, I knew, okay, who are the really legit people in this art? And so I slowly got introduced to other people. I was able to study with William Chen and with Titi Liang, who was a really amazing guy. Even he was quite old when I studied with him. And then I met Wang Yinyin, who became my principal teacher, and I became his disciple student. And I really liked my training with Wang Yinyin. Unfortunately, he's passed on now, as has Titi Liang. But you know, you'd see different teachers, and you know, this teacher's particularly soft, and this teacher's got like an amazing Fajing and things. But what I really liked about Wang Yinyin was he seemed to have all these skills, at least from my perspective as a student, really in balance. So he didn't depend on one. Sometimes you meet some teacher who was amazingly soft, like you just couldn't get him. But he then tended to rely on that one skill, whereas Wang Yinyin really used all of those skills. And also, I think perhaps because he had been a military hand-to-hand combat instructor as well, and maybe also because he lived through the wars in China, he was very good at explaining things in detail. You know, sometimes you meet a teacher who is really skilled, and amazing level of skill, but the students maybe are so-so. And it's because teaching is a different skill than the art itself. And I've even seen people where, well, maybe the teacher's not that highly skilled, as high as, say, another teacher, skilled, but not as high as maybe another guy down the road. But his students are much better because he has a good methodology. And I really saw that with Wang Yinyin. So I would credit the skills that I've achieved, whatever I have achieved, mostly to Wang Yinyin. I'm not mean no disrespect to the other teachers who definitely helped me improve things. But Wang Yinyin, I guess, kind of helped congeal it all and give it the format to keep going.
Okay, it's definitely interesting.
And that's him.
Okay.
It's a picture that normally sits there by the sword rack for people to see when it comes in, but I thought people might want to see him. There he is.
Yeah, and that's really good that you're giving recognition to your instructors. I do recognize some of the names that you dropped, particularly Titi Liang, who it's interesting that you mentioned him because I find him, and maybe you can correct me on this, but I first found out about him through a book that I had picked up years ago called Steal My Art, which was pretty much about one of his students and him living with Titi Liang for a while and talking about the experience that he had with him. And I immediately, as I was reading the book, you ever hear about certain instructors and you suddenly feel jealous that you never really got a chance? Because it's you keep hearing about, Tai Chi teachers, the stereotypical Tai Chi instructor or Tai Chi master or Kung Fu master in particular. There's a certain stereotype they give about them that they're either super stern and, stoic, or they happen to be super wise men that are giving pithy sayings. And he just seemed to come off more as a bit of a rogue.
He was kind of like the renegade of Tai Chi.
Well, Titi Liang, whereas I sort of smiling to myself when he said the super wise man, I think in Titi Liang's case, he might have been a super wise ass. And I don't mean to disrespect him at all. He liked to tell jokes. Honestly, sometimes I think he went a little too far sometimes. But he liked to play jokes on people. And one time he was here teaching at Great River. We had a seminar with him. And one of his students, he was an older guy, and one of his students was carrying his weapons bag, that's a normal thing, right? Students usually carry your stuff around for you if you're the teacher. And at lunch, we were at lunch, and the student had to run to make a phone call or something, and he got up and he left, but he forgot the sword bag. Which, of course, is a real big no-no, right? And teachers, 3 or 4 swords are in there, you're not supposed to, leave it at lunch. So he ran off, and we were like, oh, he forgot the bag. And one of the other guys was like, well, we'll hide it, like it got lost. And we hid it, and Titi Liang was like, he was totally in on the gag. He wasn't like, oh no, that's not proper. So he was like that. So he was a fun guy to be with. But man, I'll tell you, that guy absolutely had the juice. I would say this was some years ago. I would say he was in his early 80s, something like that, when I studied with him. And frankly, he could just knock you on your ass. I mean, I'm not saying that to try to falsely build him up or pretend or anything. I remember once we were discussing, a classmate and I went to stay with him for a bit and learn sword form and get some push hands in. And so we're staying in the basement of his house. And one day we're discussing the Tai Chi classics. And, I mean, Master Leon was sort of a little bit of a frumpy kind of guy. And he was in his 80s, lived by himself. He didn't, and he had all these sort of sweaters that were sort of stretched out that came over his hand like that, And he was saying, so we're discussing the classics, and he said to my classmate, stood up and said, just give me a shoulder strike. And I thought, he's an older guy, came in, hit him with shoulder strike. And Tito Leon just stood there, didn't move. He said, did you do it? Do it again. Do it again. You see, and the first time you could see the look on his face. He was like, he's 80-some years old. I might crash him into the wall. And he said, he said, okay, fine. So he gives him a little more power, hits him again with a shoulder strike. And Titi goes, did you do it? No, you didn't do it. Do it again. And you can see this time the look on his face was like, okay, old man, I'm going to give you a shoulder strike. And he comes in, he hits him with a shoulder strike. And Master Leon doesn't move. Just like standing there. And he goes, that's not a shoulder strike. This is a shoulder strike. And they were already touching. And he goes, and he sent the guy flying. I mean, knocked him off his feet. So, maybe in a dark alley I could take him on because I could run around behind him faster than he might have been able to move. But if you were standing in front of him in push hands, I mean, I saw him just repeatedly just give people a small, he'd be pushing hands and just give them a shock. And literally, bang, the feet would be knocked out from underneath them and they're sitting on their ass on the floor. So he had it in a way that, a lot of people talk about this guy's a master or a grandmaster, all these silly things today. And I think, frankly, very few people are genuinely masters because I'm not seeing them being able to do that when they're much younger, let alone when they're 80s.
Yeah.
And he's a master really, really, really had it. And so he was a great guy. And I honestly would credit him with my ability to fudging. It's something that all students go through that. You're getting softer, you're working on your alignments and your body mechanics, but to get that real springy power that we just shoot it through your body, like the way it talks about the classics, like releasing the energy from above, where it just shoots out. I didn't have that, and I was when we were visiting him, and he used to do this thing. He'd give you his sword. He had a nice old Lei Qing sword, and he'd sink and he'd do the tiao movement. The sword would spring up and vibrate like crazy. And he'd like to give it to people and have them try it. And of course, he always usually give it to the most muscled guy, and the guy would go like this, and then teach you this is how he would always joke. All muscles, no strength, And he'd say that in front of a group of 50 people sometimes, and really embarrassing. And then he'd take this sword and it was just and so he did that, and of course I did the same thing. I tried it and it didn't vibrate. And and I kind of knew he would do this because I'd seen him do it before. And he said, all muscles, no strength. He said that to me, And I was like, I said to him, do it again. I want to see him. I was there to learn, not to be impressed.
Yeah.
I already knew he had the juice. I wasn't there to be impressed. I didn't, go out to sing cloud for fun. I went to learn, and which is also fun, of course. But he did it again, and something clicked. And I said, let me try again. And I could do it. And he's like, oh, okay, now you got it, So, sometimes it's like that old saying, sometimes it's a moment with somebody who's genuinely a master can change things. But of course, there was a person with me who didn't get it, who had even more years than I did. So you have to do your groundwork. You just can't say, oh, you spent 3 seconds with the master, now all of a sudden you can do these things. No, I had spent years really training hard, putting my time in, so it was sort of a latent skill was ready to come out. I just needed some little epiphany, and I saw, I saw how it was coming from the spine. And it was kind of
and you were able to see what the other student couldn't see because of the experience that you had.
Right, and and eventually he got it. But so sometimes, it just happens for one, doesn't happen for the other. You have to put your time in and work toward it. Don't just practice with no intent. Work toward things systematically. Follow along, but then sometimes if you're just not quite got a skill, and you're with somebody who's got a special level of skill, boom, something will click, and then all of a sudden, maybe you're going up very slowly or plateauing a little bit, and then your skills up there all of a sudden, like in an instant, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's a beneficial thing to have when you're trying to master an art. You have to be with a real artist in order to have the art.
Who can really do the art, right? Can really embodies it, not just knows how to train it. So, that's what I said with Robert Smith. He trained us really well. He didn't have that kind of special level of skill, but that's not way. I'm not saying that to criticize him, because if I hadn't had years training with him, like he just made up. We stood in bow posture till you're practically standing in the puddle of your own sweat. We stood and we stood and we stood, and then it'd be like, who knows how long you're there. And then he'd say, okay, next movement, and you turn, and very slowly, absolutely step empty, and then sink into it, and then hold that. And a lot of time, the whole hour-long class was just that, an hour of that. So you were 3 minutes or so, maybe 5 minutes per leg, which doesn't sound like much until you're doing it for a whole hour.
But that's the sort of training that you don't really see, if you don't mind me interjecting. This is the type of training that you don't really see anymore. Like, this is like really old school stuff where it's like they're grinding that, movement into you. They're grinding those stances into you. It's hard to find, people blame it, on, it's our fast-paced culture today, or nobody has a good attention span anymore. And I'm not saying that isn't a good, I think it's just because the thing is, throughout centuries, you will find, no matter what it is, it's a small group of people who are willing to put in the time and effort for that. Maybe the numbers were a little bit bigger in the past, but not by leaps and bounds, but especially these days which we're going to be getting into, the state of martial arts today. That's that sort of training that you don't really see much anymore. But it's also interesting that this is coming from T.T. Liang, who, and you're again confirming this for me. Everything I've read about T.T. Liang, I've heard he was a bit of a roguester. He was a bit of a prankster. In fact, even the lines you're saying, I'm like, that sounds exactly like what I've heard before. Like one time, his son had one time been showing him some Tai Chi that he had picked up in China, and after he practiced it, he goes, "Oh, that's wonderful. What it is?" It's like, "What is it?" He said, "That's Tai Chi." He's like, "No, that wasn't Tai Chi." But the other thing that I've heard about T.T. Liang is how practical-minded he was with his training, and the stuff that you're telling me right now. I'm getting that grounded sense of training and not the type of stuff that we typically see these days.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. What I usually, the way I would normally describe the situation that we're in today, which actually I don't think is a new situation, is that people are not martial artists. They're martial artsy. We know lots of people who you just wonder, did this guy ever break a sweat? They don't really train, but we see a lot of this today. I wear this traditional jacket, which I bought in a village in China. I like it because it's a different sort of one. It was handmade cloth, and a tailor made it, and I almost didn't get it. And I thought, because I don't normally, then I thought, it's kind of nice. I like it. It's not just a standard old plain old black, And but it's kind of like as a respect towards the tradition. But I don't have a top knot. People just dress up like it's Halloween or something. Right? It's not the outward style that makes you a martial artist. It's that years of eating bitter. And when I was seriously training for competition, to go to the international competition, I stood in Zhangzhuan 3 times a week for 1 hour in the basic stance, horse stance, like this, 3 times a week for an hour. You know, how do you think you're not going to win one of those trophies if you don't do that?
Yeah, true.
You know, and you know, this is nothing new. I didn't do anything special. I did what I was supposed to do. I'm not saying that makes me special because I did that. I just did what we all know you're supposed to do. You read all those stories or hear the stories or, you know, lineage tradition.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, you know, he did this. Well, you know, they weren't Supermen. You know, my principal teacher, Wang Yin,
Mm-hmm.
he has bow legs, or he's passed now, but he was bow-legged because he had malnutrition as a kid. He lived through the war with the communists and then the war with the Japanese. He was a soldier. He was lucky to live through it. He was a high-ranking officer. He was an artillery officer in Yin Shishan's provincial army. And you know, this was not, excuse me, this is not a fun time to live in China. It wasn't an easy time to live in China. You know, I remember one time I was walking with him on the National Mall here in Washington, and there are a lot of elm trees that line the mall, and they make these little funny little seeds with a little kind of furry edge on them, and they're just all over the ground. And it was in the spring, of course, and just come down, they're just real thick. And he said, "Do people collect these?" And I said, "Oh, why would you collect these seeds? You know?" And he said, "Oh, well, you know, you can, if you take these seeds, you can make a kind of flour out of them and make noodles." When I was young, we'd collect these. I mean, do you know how bad off you have to be that you're collecting tree seeds to make a little bit of noodles so you have something to eat? And so, if somebody can live through that and become highly skilled, then we got it easy. I mean, look. This is the back of my home. This is part of my training hall. You're only seeing about 2/3 of it. I have all this to make it really easy for me. I have no excuse for not reaching a high level. I have plenty of food to eat. I have good clean air. I don't have to worry that, you know, the country's going to be invaded and we're going to have to fight for our lives and our homes are going to be destroyed, right? So this is just the problem. People like to dress up and act like they're martial artists, but frankly, they're not. Really, it's almost like a Halloween costume that people are putting on, and frankly, they don't even know. If you look at historical images of martial artists, they don't look like the images you see today at martial arts tournaments with these gaudy colors and sequins and stuff. Most martial artists were not eating that well. It was not a high-paying job in the martial arts.
Yeah.
So I think people have really, Hong Kong movie ideas about what Chinese history is that are just nonsense, and they're not really willing to eat bitter. And eat bitter day after day after day. That's the only way you're going to reach a high level of skill in anything. So
We're struggling through it.
yeah.
You bring up the fact that your main instructor was living through some of the harsher periods in Chinese history, and that obviously is going to be bringing up warfare, which of course then brings up weapons, because no matter what we've seen in old kung fu movies, you don't fight, you know, wars with bare hands unless you got no other option. So we might as well get into the swords. I mean, I know that's a reason why a lot of people can show up on my channel anyway, because they all seem to think that all I talk about is swords. And I talk about swords a lot, but it's not the only thing I talk about. But
There's no denying swords are cool.
yes, they are freaking cool. That's why I got into it in the first place.
Absolutely. I think we all agree on that.
So what I would like to ask is, considering that it is the main weapon that you're known for, I mean, you teach a lot. Like you're teaching the whole Yang Tai Chi Chuan system. I've seen you actually talking about. I mean, you even mentioned it just now. The fact archery, you know, Chinese archery and horseback. I know you've showed Dao forms as well, but you're known for the Jian. You're known for the Chinese straight sword. So what I would like to ask is, which one of the instructors, or if maybe it was all of them, who were the ones who like set you on that path, and you know, just give a little bit of your background and history of like where you picked up your art of swordsmanship. Who were the ones who kind of set you on that path, and also how is it that I'm just going to come out front and say, the way you do it is a lot more practical minded, and the way you portray, even though I see it's rooted in the traditional, it's very rooted in the traditional, but the way you present it is so much different from the way I've seen so many other teachers present it. So I was kind of wondering where that comes from and which one of the instructors that you've gone through also kind of like set you on that particular path.
Well, I learned sword first from Teach the Yang and then from Wang Yunyan. And I would say that I'm not really doing anything unusual. What I'm doing is actually just following the tradition. I'm actually doing what my teachers said to do. Whereas most people, first of all, I think most people are not really practicing sword today. I mean, look, let's think about this sensibly and logically. The Yang family, Yang Luchan, and then his sons, were teaching Taiji Chuan during a time of warfare. You know, people present Taiji Chuan as it's some sort of therapeutic exercise for old people. That's absolute historical nonsense. This is not a Taoist art. I probably just rubbed like 100,000 people the wrong way. This, read the manuals. I was one time I was reading Yang Chen Fu's Taiji Chuan Ti Yong Fa, the essence and applications of Taiji Chuan. Louis Swain did an excellent translation of that. I would recommend it to anybody. And I'm reading it, just reading the applications of different movements. And I forget which one it was. And it said, and if you do this movement properly, as striking the chest with your palm, your opponent will be knocked down and spit out blood. And I started sort of laughing to myself because I had this image of all these nice old ladies at the retirement home doing their Taiji. If they read that, they'd be aghast. It doesn't say, and if you do this and you move your chi from your pinky down to your big toe, then you will be rejuvenated and your liver will regrow. It doesn't say things like that. It says, if you hit him like this, you'll stop his breathing. If you do this, you'll knock him down. That's what it talks about. And if you read the Yang family's manuals, it also very, very clearly says over and over again throughout the different manuals that you will not gain the civil aspects of Taiji Chuan if you do not have a clear understanding of the martial. So most people practicing Taiji Chuan today are not practicing Taiji Chuan at all in the way that the founders explained you should practice. And I think this is a kind of arrogance, frankly. People who practice Taiji Chuan for 2 or 3 years decide, well, so sure, it used to be a martial art, but we don't practice it as a martial art today, so that's not irrelevant. That's ridiculous. Are you saying that you understand how to practice Yang Luchan's art better than he knew how to practice it? I mean, the guy who created it, this guy was at a skill level that sounds, magical, this guy's skill level. The guy who won his position by fighting. No other way. Yang Luchan didn't win any beauty contests. His moniker was Yang Wudi. Wudi means literally no enemies or no rivals. That means you're so good that you don't have any enemies because it's like Mike Tyson. I don't care how good your push hands is. I'm not fighting Mike Tyson. If he's strapped down, I'm not fighting Mike Tyson, right? I mean, the guy is, it'd be crazy to fight Mike Tyson, That's what Yang Luchan was, like this kind of level fighter. He was in over 3 provinces undefeated. Now, he wasn't called no rivals because he was so handsome. It's because he won these contests. And practitioners today absolutely ignore all of that and talk about it like it's a Taoist rejuvenation exercise. That is historical nonsense. Read the books. Don't take my word for it. Read the primary sources. Read what was written. Read what they said. So you only gain the civil benefits of the art if you practice it martially, which makes total sense because if you're doing these movements, what's the language that they speak? It's all martial. If you say to me, I'm practicing Taiji Chuan for my health. Well, good, great. It's a great reason to practice Taiji Chuan. I mean, everyone wants to stay healthy, and you have to be healthy to be a good martial artist. You can't be unhealthy and be a good martial artist. So that's really great. Let's do that. But, if you say, well, you're doing it as meditation, excellent. I also use it for meditation. But if you're saying, well, you're doing this movement, single whip or whichever, and you don't know what you're doing, how can you be doing it mindfully? See? That doesn't really make sense. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to, it's this type of concentration meditation. So you don't know what you're doing because you don't know how the movement's used. You don't know where the focus is. You don't know where the deflection is, where the strike is. And you're not doing it mindfully. I don't know any type of meditation that's done without being mindful of what you're doing. So the suggestion that Tai Chi Chuan is, well, we just do it as a health art, is completely uninformed. And, Zhen Manjing said that Tai Chi Chuan that's practiced that way is, essentially useless. He said it's no better than just taking a walk in a park, is basically what he said, because you're just waving your hands around. So Tai Chi Chuan that ignores the the literal quote Chen Manjing wrote in his book was, Tai Chi Chuan that ignores the martial provides health benefits that are at best superficial. So that's Chen Manjing. It's not Scott Rodell. That's Chen Manjing. So if you don't like that, don't get mad at me. These are what these acknowledged, experienced teachers, people who are considered masters, had to say about the art. And I'm following them. So when people say, oh, you practice very differently than the majority of people, I am simply practicing the way that my teachers laid out for me. And when I was, talk about the sword, when Wang Yinyin really taught the sword, the first time he really taught the sword was at my school. And I was really quite honored, but also kind of, better not mess this up. I was at a seminar, he was teaching in the US, and he was first up in New York, and he was going to come down here to Washington to teach at Great River. And so I was up there, and I was having tea with him after class one day, and he said, I've never taught this before, and I've never wanted to teach this before. And that was sort of, that was, I think, also a very Chinese way of saying, you better not mess this up, kid.
Honestly, I think that is.
Yes, and what we did, he said, I need you to go get bricks and build these sawhorses, because what you do is you set the bricks up and you practice your cuts between those bricks. And what we didn't practice form, we didn't talk about qi. What did we do? We spent almost all the time just practicing basic cuts. Most people who are teaching sword, if you ask them what are the basic cuts of your system, they look at you like you're speaking Greek or something. They don't know.
That's the thing I've noticed. I've noticed, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I was just saying that is actually one of the things that I wanted to bring up. The fact that, I can count, at least from my personal experience, of the little bit of sword that I've picked up, trying to train the martial arts. And also from the stuff that I've read, the media picked up, I can only think of the people who mentioned the basic cuts and actually show the drills in one hand. Like the amount of instructions I can think of in one hand. Usually when they're teaching weapons, they go straight into forms and that's it. And
how can you understand the forms if you don't know the components? If you don't know what's a liao, how is it used, what's its target zones, what's the difference between a P and a DN? They can look very similar in the system, especially if you don't know how to use them. You see a lot of overextension in ways that will hurt the wrist if you actually do it. So this thing, along with this, so first thing is you learn the basic cuts. That's it. You really learn the basic cuts and you drill them. If you're learning sword here, then you spend about 6 months doing basic cuts before you ever start learning the form. What happens is that people learn the form very quickly because they know what they're doing. So solo basic cuts, then combinations of basic cuts, then those combinations with stepping. A lot of people don't work on their stepping. You have to work on your stepping a lot to be good at it in free play. And you're doing all the partner drills for all those exercises. First, singles like P cut, P cut, P cut, whichever thrust, Qiao Dian, different combinations, and then more complicated ones. But it's not long two-person sets. So you can do, when you do 300 deflect P cut, first of all, your arm's going to feel like it's going to drop off. There's a lot of strength training that has to be done. And so, but after you've done that for months, the form is like nothing. Form is easy to do. And then you look at the form and go, oh, I see, the form is teaching me certain principles. The form is showing me, this cut sets up this cut, or this cut. Shows you variations. This cut can come off the back leg, or it can come off the front leg, or I could use a circular step, and the form is encoding all those things. You have to remember, in our time, it's rare to meet somebody who can't read. I don't know anybody who can't read. I know people don't read, but they can read.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate. We live in a time where essentially everybody in our country, nearly everybody's literate. It's rare that you find somebody who's not. In China, in Qing Dynasty times, literacy was very low. Maybe only 3 or 4% of the people could actually read and write. Maybe 10% at most. But learning written Chinese is much more difficult than a system written with letters. Mm-hmm. So only the literati could really read. And there'd be a scale in there. I mean, you might be able to read a few hundred characters versus 3 to 5,000 or 10,000. The scholar might know 10,000. That's a lot of memorization. Very few people had that. So if you're Yang Luchan or whoever and you create a system, how are you going to pass that on? You can't write everything down. First of all, you write it down in the book, most people aren't going to read it anyway. You have to encode your experience into the form. So not every possible combination, not every scenario is in there, but the form is the manual. The form is our textbook. Mm. And if you understand the components, then you can start doing that. This is a lot like learning to play chess. Not that I'm a chess player, but people in know are. When you're learning to play chess, first thing is you got to learn. You have to know all the pieces move, right? If you don't know how the pieces move, so that's like learning the basic cuts. Then, which pieces work well together? And you study old games, right? Games of masters, and see. And you can. This is a wonderful thing about chess that you can't do in swordplay. We don't have videotape of some Li Jinglin's matches or something. We have that. It'd be fantastic. And you study, and you do setups, and you study openings, middle game, end game, and you have problem solving, and you learn formations. Right? You're not moving. I'm just moving around. Maybe if I attack a lot, maybe at least I will last long enough to make it look good. I don't know how to play chess, but chess players, as I understand, there's formations that work well together. Those are recorded and taught. It's no different than sword. Why do you think you see Liao Jia as a common combination? Because it works. Why do Pi and Si? Because it works. A Tian Tiao. These things work. These are common ones. And those get encoded into the form. These are combinations that work well in the form. And then but they're not every single combination or every way that you can step and move. So you also have to break down and practice those separately in short pieces, 2 or 3 movements, 2 at first, 1 at first, then 2s, then 3s, and maybe 4s. 4s get pushing it a little bit, but it's good for a more advanced student, more experienced student. And you build those up and you learn, this combination works, that combination works. What's a variant of that combination? Right? Because in famous chess, there's this certain chess opening. But there's the variation that this Russian guy came up with, right? Mm. So there may be standard ones, those are in the forms. And you can be sure nobody is putting their best secret combinations in any form that's going to be taught.
No, of course.
I tell you, I don't do that. I have cut combinations that work very nicely that I teach to my apprentice students, and I don't show them publicly. Why would I? That's your best technique. That's something those are my techniques. Those are that I learned from my years of experience. I'm not giving those away, on YouTube. Why should I give it away on YouTube? Nobody does that. If you're, you think that the top-notch Olympic fencers, if they have a good trick, they're going to show it on YouTube? No. So all I'm doing is following the playbook given to me by my teacher. And I'm using it and I'm training it. So I'm coming up with things that my teacher didn't teach me, but they were there to be discovered. So I still gotta give credit to all the way back to young and child. You know, I'm just the caretaker for this time till the next guy takes over.
Good way of putting it, especially the whole care, you know,
Well,
being the
it's
caretaker.
the truth. I mean, I'm just the caretaker. I'm doing it, and then, you know, I'm working now to create the next generation of caretakers.
One thing that, since you see yourself as one of the caretakers of Chinese swordsmanship, one question I guess I should ask you, and I was planning on doing it anyway, is why do you think Chinese swordsmanship has gotten to the state that it is in today, where there are few people doing it the way that your teachers have set you on? I'm not really, I don't think I'm saying anything untoward, because this has been a common complaint that I have heard spoken by other masters. Like Adam Hsu has constantly said that Chinese martial arts are dying and they're not being taught the way they should. Old masters before us, way before us, were already complaining, saying that the weapon arts have become sideshows, that, you know, like guys from like the late 1800s were complaining that they felt that, you know, martial arts are dying and they're not being used correctly.
Sure, in Chen Wei-Ming's book, he says exactly that. You know, the way of the sword is to attack the hand. It's not the cut off the thumb thing. That's a little too extreme. But you know, you attack the hand, and I generally teach hand and in. I'm always drilling something hand and in, because you have to either disable the hand, move the hand, or go around the sword hand, with the sword arm, of course, because that's what's in front of you, coming at you. So if you have to either deflect and move it, make an opening, but the closest thing is always going to be the sword arm, then the sword leg. Usually the same leg is forward. Once you cut that, or you cut at it, maybe the Beifang moves, then you can go in. And Chen Wei-Ming, in his book, in Introduction to Tai Chi Jian, says this is the same in sword. But today, people are jumping like, you know, fast like the wind, and jumping like a dragon, and da-da-da-da. But basically, that's all useless stuff today. They don't understand this art how to cut and move in has not been transmitted. So I think you're absolutely right. This is not a new thing. I think we have this tendency to go, back when Lao Tzu was riding his buffalo, everything was really good. No, things were probably really bad back then. Probably sanitation wasn't so good. This is nothing new. I remember reading Musashi complaining about students not taking their sword work seriously. Musashi was famous Japanese swordsman, lived during the Warring States period. And at times you think that if I'm carrying a sword, I would be good with it, because people around me are getting killed. And even then, Musashi said, people are not taking their sword work seriously. And of course, Musashi was a fanatic, but still, I think his point's well taken. And as you said, Adam Hsu said that. My own teacher, Wang Yanyan, once said to me, when I was over in Taiwan, he said, you know, in the future, when Chinese people want to learn Tai Chi training, they'll have to go to Europe and America, because they're not taking it seriously. So I think this, though, it's not, first of all, it's not a new problem. If you look around, in any art, there's few people who are willing to eat bitter. You know, I don't think there's, you know, the only thing maybe that's different about me from other people is I would stand there for an hour. You know, and I would be determined I'm going to stand here for an hour, because I need that. You know, that's the only way I'm going to be strong enough to go to these international tournaments. So you just have to decide to do it and be determined to do it. So I think that's the number one thing, is determination. You have to have that determination. And a lot of people, frankly, don't. It's in anything. It's not just in martial arts. Years ago, one of my senior students was lamenting this exact same thing. And he's a very, very good musician, very dedicated musician. And I said to him, how long have you been playing? He said 16 years. And he played mostly saxophone, but he could play clarinet and other things as well. And I said, I bet you in that, over this last 16 years, if you think back, every year you met somebody who was really exceptional. Like, this guy's got it. If he keeps up, he's going to be fantastic. He's really got something. And he thought of that, and he said, yeah, that's true. About every year you meet somebody. And I said, I bet you now none of those people are playing. He thought again and said, yeah, you know, you're right. So I think this is a common thing. Of course, we're focused on martial arts, so we see it in the martial arts world. But it's just simply this thing. You have to be willing to eat bitter and persevere no matter what, and then you can reach the highest level. Is no other way. You know, I don't think I'm particularly, you know, like naturally skilled at this. I just refuse to give up. That's all. I have no desire. I can say I refuse to give up. I have no desire to give up. I love this stuff, and I'm just going to keep working on it and continue to get better all the time, as much as I can, until the day I die. And you know, that's just what I want to do. So if anybody out there wants to reach a high level, you can. The reason I always talk about my teacher Wang Yunyan being bow-legged and having malnutrition is to say, look, he wasn't born on a Taoist mountain and, you know, phoenixes and Qilin didn't come along and, you know, tell the world about his birth. He was born at a time when it was very difficult in China, and he had a difficult life, and still he achieved a very high level. If he can do it, there's no reason why any of us can't do it. You know, this idea of putting the teacher up on a pedestal is very bad for students and teachers alike. And I think it's one thing. I mentioned I also studied with William Chen, who is an absolutely fantastic teacher and really skilled guy, and no question, fantastic teacher. It's up in New York, and I would go once a month up to New York to push errands and do sancho with those guys. A great group of students too. I haven't been there in years, but when I was there, man, fantastic guys, really good, and not just their skills, but personally. And I interviewed Master Chen once, and I even said that in the interview, you know, as a student, there's certain things, you know, you're not supposed to ask a teacher, it would be impolite. But, you know, my job as a journalist means I have to ask some of those questions. He said, no problem, don't worry about it. But I asked him about learning with Chen Nanjing, and he said, because he started with Chen when he was just a boy, and he said that when he first met Chen Nanjing, he thought he was like a genie. That's the word he used, genie. Because he could do things that nobody else could do. So he thought he was like sort of supernatural. Then what happened was there was a typhoon, and Chen Nanjing made his living as a painter. His paintings were quite valuable. And the typhoon came, knocked the back wall of the house down, and so they were afraid burglars could come in. So William Chen, being I think a young teenager at the time, slept in a room near that wall. So if any burglars came in, he'd be ready to, you know, raise the alarm. Yeah. And he said he lived in his Zheng's house for 3 years. So he was really close to him for 3 years. And he said that once he lived in Chen Nanjing's house, he said he realized he was just a man. And that he had 2 arms, and I have 2 arms. And he has 2 legs, and I have 2 legs. So anything Chen Nanjing achieved, I should be able to achieve. And I think this is the attitude students should have. When you see somebody, and this guy is really skilled, or he has something special, instead of being like, wow, check that guy out, you should be saying, please explain to me how that you did that, and what time is practice so I can be there. You know, that's the thing. So as I said, you know, when Teacher Leon, I talked about him earlier, when he did the sword thing, and he'd do that to kind of make fun of people, and he did it to me, which was, you know, it's fair game. Yeah. I didn't just go, wow, oh man, I can't do it. Master Leon is so cool. I handed sort of back to him and said, do it again. And I might have been, I said it kind of like that. I think I said it with maybe not the right tone of voice for a student, but I think maybe also understood. I wanted it. Do it again. Yeah. Come on. And then I said, let me try again. Something clicked. So I wasn't going to just go, ooh, Master Wang was so amazing. Ooh, Teacher Liang, he can do all this stuff. Oh, William Chen, he can hit so fast, you can't see him. I'm there to get their art from them. I'm not there to be entertained. I'm not there for any other reason. I'm there to get the art from myself. Right? So, and I think this is the way to go. So all students should say, you can respect your teacher. I'm not saying you don't respect your teacher. It's important that you respect your teacher, right? So there's a saying, respect for the teacher is respect for the Tao. And I used to not like that, you know, very libertarian. It kind of sounded like some Chinese social control thing, you know. I didn't really like that, to be honest. But I thought, well, you know, before I just cast it away, I should think about it. And I thought, well, you know, this actually is really quite important because the teacher is the vessel. The teacher is the container that the art is in. and you want the teacher to pour that art into you. And no teacher's going to want to pour that art into you if you disrespect them. Because if you're disrespecting them, you're also disrespecting the art.
The art, yeah.
If you disrespect the art, well, why would I teach you my art? I eat lots of I ate big bitter sandwiches, to get this stuff. And again, I'm not going to just give to somebody who acts disrespectfully. And it's not because I really don't care if people respect me or not, I know who I am. I'm solid. I'm good. I'm enjoying my life and my practice. My practice is giving me a lot to my life. So, if somebody doesn't think I'm the real deal or calls me a fake, whatever, I'm fine. Let them go cut an arrow out of the air, Oh, go ahead, that's fine, But if you don't expect to act that way toward the art and come into my wuguan and expect me to be all excited about teaching you.
Well, the thing that you're teaching besides Tai Chi Chuan is, again, swordsmanship, which we're also talking about. To kind of go a little bit off the question that I asked earlier about, why you think that the arts are being taught the way they are and how you're pointing out that this has been an ongoing problem. It's also kind of interesting to me that if you look at Chinese martial arts these days, the weapon that I happen to see the least amount of skill in as far as using it practically, yet at the same time is probably one of the most popular weapons, especially in contemporary wushu, is the jian. And I was wondering if you might be able to have if you had a few ideas in that interesting dichotomy that we have there. Where it's extremely popular, especially if you look at modern day kung fu movies, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, swordsmanship is on display there. The new Dragon Gate, the new Dragon Gate Inn, which Jet Li was in, which is actually a sequel from an older movie and all that. Again, the sword is probably...
The original Dragon Gate was great, I loved it.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
The work was silly, but it was a great movie.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, these swordplay epics that we see in these wushu movies. But, we also know that the skill displayed there is, not exactly the real thing, which you can also see in the Western world as well. But maybe you could give a couple of bit of insight in how even practicing it, just remove it from the movies, period. Like I know that in any culture, the sword tends to be venerated, and if we look at fiction, they always show an exaggerated form of the art. But when you go down to, say, a fencing school or a kendo dojo, you'll see the practical art done there. But when you're looking at Chinese martial arts, most of the time you're learning dance.
So
I think you inadvertently hit the nail on the head there. If you go to a kendo school or a fencing club, the people there who are serious, and there's all kinds of people, and I should maybe, just as a footnote here, say, my son was doing sword work with me when he was just a little lad, and thought, he can't fight with adults all the time because it's big. So I took him to the local fencing school, and he got hooked, and he very seriously was national champion and bronze medal in World Cup competition. So he's a very serious fencer. And at first, I honestly didn't think a lot of fencing. It's like tag with little antennas. Many people practicing some type of historical swordsmanship are not so keen on fencing. And I have to say I was absolutely wrong in that opinion. Fencing is a fantastic, it's a sport. It's not a martial art. It's a martial sport, so it's different. But fortunately in this area, we have fencing coaches who are former world champions, and one of my son's early coaches was the Soviet Union's coach for the Australian Olympics. So, this is just the local guy you go to. It's not, it's just, hey, it's a school that's 10 minutes away. So we're very fortunate to have that. And you see, but the difference is that with serious fencers, the ones who are competitive fencers, in fencing they will divide. There are people called club fencers who are just having fun, they just fence at the club. And there are the competitive fencers. But all of those people, regardless of which group they're in, all fence every time they go to the club. And every single month, there's a good competition you can go to locally. We went to competition every month. And not a form competition to see how cool you look in your fancy pajamas. You went to a competition where the other guy was really going to try to beat you. Every month. And this is something, so fencers and kendo guys are the same. they are practicing their art to go and face somebody in a competitive situation where they are going to really try to beat you down. I mean, after the fencing bout, everybody's very friendly. It's one of the nice things about fencing. Great attitudes amongst the people. You don't find, any kind of bickering or whatever. But on the strip, man, it ain't nobody your friend. They are going at you, and you can be hurt. Plenty of bruises and welts and stuff. And so that's the difference. People practicing whatever Chinese martial arts today have all kinds of silly notions about why the art is practiced. And let's be honest, there are plenty of Tai Chi teachers, Kung Fu teachers, Heart style teachers, especially Chinese, let's be honest, who are selling it as some sort of thing other than what it is. Because you can make a lot of money teaching people forms. And then, you learn a form, learn another form, learn another form, learn another form. And you become a form collector, and in fact, you have nothing. And so I think this is the difference. So you really hit the nail on the head. I teach swordsmanship. I don't usually tell people, say I teach Tai Chi Jian. I don't do that. I teach Jianfa. I have students coming from Eagle Claw, White Crane, Wing Chun, Bagua, Xingyi, sometimes occasionally Hema guys, all these different hard styles, as well as, of course, Tai Chi Chuan and different lineages of Tai Chi Chuan. Because when they come to the seminar, I'm not teaching them about how they need to relax their big toe. I'm teaching them how do you use this sword. From day one, the moment you walk in the door, it's how you deflect and countercut effectively. And on day one, you're going to be practicing the things that you're learning with another student who is also trying to hit you from day one. Because this is a martial art, which is what you do when you go to a fencing club or a kendo club. See, I'm not doing anything revolutionary. What I'm doing is something that's a renaissance, not a revolution. See? So I would say that, frankly, the vast majority of people who are just waving a sword around are not practicing swordsmanship at all. In fact, I would say the vast majority of people haven't even begun to practice swordsmanship. I don't care how many years they've done the form. And I'll say it I use my prop.
Okay.
Plastic dart gun. If you very, very conscientiously, with something that's not at all like a real gun, it doesn't weigh what a real gun weighs, it's not balanced the way a real gun is, but you with very precise mind intent, and squeeze the trigger, and aim very carefully, squeeze the trigger, and then I'm trying to make a sort of Tai Chi here, and squeeze the trigger. I don't care how many years you do that, no one will consider you a marksman, and nobody will consider you ready to go onto a battlefield or be a policeman or a member of SWAT. Doing that will not make you an expert marksman, and it will not make you somebody who's competent with this weapon, because this is not a weapon, to go out and use it in a practical situation. Right? Sure. This is not going to happen. Dry firing practicing pulling trigger is something that they do. That's a small piece of what you do if you are serious about shooting. Most practitioners today are using swords that are significantly less than real swords weigh and are not balanced at all in the way that swords of the Ming and Qing dynasties were balanced. So if you're practicing with something that weighs a third or less of what a real sword weighs, that is essentially a sword-like object, then I would say no matter how many years you've waved that around doing the form, you have yet to begin sword practice because you've yet to practice with a sword.
Do you think that perhaps they should, and I know there have been some attempts to do this, Do you
Do you think that perhaps if they found a way to sportify Jianfa, that might be a way of kind of resuscitating it?
Personally, I feel no.
Okay.
The reason is because there is a difference between a sport and a martial art. And I'm personally following the martial way. That's what I want to do. And being a martial artist, being a swordsman, is something that's quite different than being a sportsman. And I'm not putting down sports at all. Remember, my son did it. I think fencing is a fantastic sport. I enjoy watching fencing. But it's a very different situation. And of course, you can argue today, I mean, sword is irrelevant as a weapon of war. I can say, forgive me if it sounds boastful, but I can say I have a pretty good reputation as a swordsman. But if you count all the times that the 10th Mountain Division called me before they deployed to Afghanistan, count all those times up all together, it still comes out to 0 times. Nobody's interested in like, oh, let's get our special forces guys over that Scott Rodell guy, so their Gen 5 is good. They don't really need Gen 5, right? So this is a totally anachronistic practice. I'm doing next to my Gen here by me. But there's something different about swordsmanship and the martial way. And I have, from the very beginning, worked very purposely to keep training dangerous. Most people are trying to make it safe. I'm not trying to turn Gen 5 into LARP. Those are different things. People enjoy doing LARPing. I have students who do the Star Wars thing. It's fun. You're enjoying yourself. Go and do it. But I've said, you better not bring a plastic toy into my whoop-line. You'll be thrown out. You know, if I go to their house, I go their rules, right?
Yeah.
But in my house, no. So I think this is the thing. Because when it is dangerous, when there's real danger, there's going to be real fear. And when there's real fear, then you have the opportunity to learn to deal with that fear, to learn to let go of it and stay in the moment, and to stay calm in the midst of real conflict. When someone's going to hit you with a chunk of wood that weighs, 800 grams, a pound and 3/4, something like that, it hurts. It really hurts. And you look.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. No, right. I didn't have to tell you that part, right? It really hurts, And we do a lot of our training with very little equipment, and you get hurt. This is martial arts. People are like, oh, what you're doing is dangerous. Yeah, if you're on a race in Indianapolis 500, it's dangerous. You're choosing to do this. And I think this is something that we've got to come to grips with and stop kidding ourselves. Stop being martial artsy and, get with the program and be a martial artist like you say you are. There's a difference between the two. People say, oh, I want to come and learn Sancho. I want to defend myself. And I said, that's great. Do you understand there's a good chance your nose is going to be broken, you're going to get lots of bruises, you're going to be beaten up, things are going to happen to you. You're learning Sancho. When we practice Sancho, most of the time our training is bare hand. Because that's what you have on the street. You have all rats and everything. And they go, well, I don't want to get hurt. How did you think you were going to learn martial arts without sweating and getting bruises? That's kind of ridiculous. Actually, that's not kind of ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
So this is the problem. People want to do sticky sword. That's not sword work. That's a modern practice. That's not the traditional practice. So despite what everybody's telling you, that is a modern practice. And it's not swordsmanship. It's like thinking, if you think that's sword fighting or you think that's fencing, then you must think push hands is street fighting. I mean, think about that. You might be really good at push hands, fixed at push hands, you're really good. You're going to go against a second or third year boxer on the street? No, you're not. Everybody knows you're not. So I think, frankly, we've got to stop patting ourselves on the back, stop putting on a show, and start being honest about what we're really doing. If somebody wants to just practice the sword form or whatever, as a more interesting way to practice, maybe it's more fun for them, that's fine, as long as they're clear about what they're doing. I have no problem with that. Plenty of people who've come into my school have only done the form, and they've done it because they enjoy doing the form. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with a person like that now saying, I'm a teacher of Taiji Chuan. Because you really haven't started Taiji Chuan yet. You haven't ever, you're doing rollback. Has anybody ever tried to really punch you in the face while you're doing rollback? I mean, really tried to punch you in the face? I mean, you can tell from the shape of my nose how many times I've been punched in the face. That's how you learn a rollback. So, do you really know what a rollback is? And if you don't really know what a rollback is because you've yet to really do a rollback, do you really think you should be teaching it to other people? And my answer would be no. And I know the vast majority of people out there are going to disagree with me because I'm smashing their rice bowl.
Yeah, which is, in this day and age, again, even during the time when this stuff was being used, even during a time when martial arts was necessary, there was still, this whole thing of teaching it in a sort of more mysterious way in order to keep the students in the school and to get that certain level of notoriety and to keep their rice bowls full. And in this day and age is even going to be more so because now that it is no longer something that's seen as viable as far as combat is concerned, whether it's swordmanship, even though it is, but it is in certain contexts. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I can run around with a sword and during an age of gun, I'm still going to get shot. But if you put me in a situation where somebody's having their stick and my stick, maybe I might have a chance. Right. But generally, we're now training in an art that has very few gatekeepers left. So it seems to me that because of that, you will have a whole lot of people who are able to put on airs and give a certain expected ambiance about what they're teaching, and they're able to get away with certain things. At least, they were. These days, now with MMA and with other things that are popping up, namely HEMA and all that, the amount of people who are trying to get away with that, I've been noticing they're getting more and more quiet or appearing less and less because they're going to be some couple of dudes showing up at your door to test if you are who you say you are.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I mean, this is the thing. I would say, there's very few gatekeepers. I would say there's actually very few practitioners. Real practitioners of martial arts, especially Chinese martial arts. Most people, I'm sorry, I know I said this before, but I'm going to repeat it. They're martial artsy, not martial artists. Come on. It's not about wearing, fancy pajamas and moving around slowly or just, doing the forms. And I should say, I'm not against wushu in any way. Wushu is pretty amazing stuff, but it's like gymnastics. That's a modern thing. It's performance oriented. It's very physical. I can't do it. It's extremely physically demanding, but it's a totally different kind of training, and it's not obviously for throwing down with a sword or any place else.
Yeah.
So I think this is simply, I think we're going to start being honest. And I think you're right that things like MMA and challengers to quote, all these quote traditional masters and grandmasters and everybody else has been very good for the art in that people are forced to be honest. But also I think what's going on is there is I would say a con. It's a con. Because look, if I say I'm a martial artist, I've sat here and said I'm following the martial way. I don't think of myself as a fighter. I'm not looking for fights. I'm not getting pointless fights. But I'm following this martial way. And that's because I get a lot from it. That's what I want to do. A swordsmith friend of mine once said, I don't make swords because I can't do anything else. He said, I make swords because I can't do anything else. It's like that's his passion in life, and that's how I feel. This is what I love to do, and is what I'm going to keep doing until I drop dead one day. But that's not the only thing I do in life. I should also maybe say there that I think it's a mistake that people like myself can fall into because you're so passionate about the art that you give up your life to the art. I think that's an error. I'm not dedicating my life to the art. I'm dedicating the art to my life. And I think that's something that everybody should be sure that the art is for you to make your life better. don't give up your life to the art, because then you're going to end up. I mean, we've all seen martial artists who've given their life to the art and they don't have anything else in life, and they often end up unhappy at the end of life. So I wouldn't suggest that to anybody. But I think it's just as simple as this: we have to go back and be honest with ourselves, and not say, if I say, yes, Tai Chi Chuan used to be taught as a martial art, but we're doing it as a way to maintain our health and have longevity and peace and tranquility. Anybody can give a good spiel for an hour in front of a class at the local, church civic center. You don't actually know if that person's health is any better, if they're actually have more tranquil in life, if they're actually going to live longer. When you pitch whatever art it is you're doing, Tai Chi Chuan or anything else, as this sort of groovy kind of thing to make your life all mystical and healthy, you're taking away the yardstick by which the student can measure you by. Because you can't tell if I'm healthier or stronger or going to live longer because you came to a couple of my classes. But when I say I'm a martial artist, well, I'm not going to pick a fight with Mike Tyson, but I wouldn't recommend anybody does. But you can tell, and when people come to my seminars, why do you think a guy? I'm known as a practitioner of Tai Chi Chuan. Why would practitioners of Eagle Claw come to my sword seminars? Those people come, or Wing Chun, or other styles, guys who are, they're regularly practicing fighting in their schools are coming to my sword seminars, because I'm not doing that. It's straightforward. Come in, and I'll sometimes they want to go, okay, come on, and hit them with your sword, and then they win them over. It's like pulling the thorn out of the giant's paw. You have to show people that you have skill, and I don't find that to be discourteous. If at a seminar somebody, wants to have a little go, and I'll often say to somebody's experience when I'm demonstrating, okay, come on, come at me with whatever you like.
Because they want to test your hands.
There's nothing wrong with politely showing that you have some juice. Why should everybody accept that this guy, because he's Grandmaster, Bing Fu from whatever place, that he's some great Grandmaster who knows everything and can defeat all comers? In a lot of those cases, those guys, their push hand isn't even any good, and no one's even testing them. They never have to show that they have any skill, because it's automatically accepted that they have skill. Why? Because of the color of their skin? We have to grow up and get past that, or go back to the real thing. My teacher Wang Yin, he told us about times he was practicing one morning and 4 people came to challenge him. Right? And they're well-known people in Taiwan at the time. And he said, okay. And some wanted to try push hand, some wanted to try Sancho. One guy said, never mind. But they came to his fight, and and he held his own, and so he was respected. The other people, nowadays, if somebody goes, sometimes I think it's silly, of course, to get these internet challenges. Somebody says, oh, you're no good, I'll come and kick your ass. I'm thinking, dude, you live on the other side of the ocean. You got to spend $3,000 or $4,000. I'm not coming to you. You want to challenge me? You want to come and fight? Fine.
You can keep going.
Right. So the internet challenges are kind of silly, but at some point, of course, you should be. Whatever you're doing, you've got to get in there and show your skills. This is why I always had a great mad respect for William Chen. He pushed hands with everybody who ever came to his class. He did Sancho every day with everybody who was in class. He didn't sit on the sidelines pontificating. He's in there getting sweaty with you.
Which is what we need to see.
Yeah.
Okay, so testing. Had a bit of technical difficulties because my microphone died, so now I'm recording this with a last-ditch effort microphone. The video camera, unfortunately, just died. There's, the juice that I'm on my porch, and there's no freaking outlet. So we're probably going to have a still image of my face or something. But I wanted to ask, I know this interview has gotten pretty long. We're past an hour, but I have to ask, we've talked about the setbacks that, even though it is a universal thing, we've seen it throughout time, but it does seem to be a bit more prevalent in the modern era, the setbacks that come about in trying to teach martial arts in a practical way that's actually grounded in reality and grounded in practical usage. But at the same time, I think that the modern era has also afforded Chinese martial artists and other particular traditions. It's actually given them a couple of pros as well. It's not all cons. Like there are some advantages to teaching in the modern age. I've actually read and heard other people saying that we're sort of living in a new golden age now when it comes to martial arts instruction in the form of media. The books, the instruction in certain books. I mean, you're not going to be able to replace. This is something I've actually gotten a little. Some people got heated at me for saying this. When I say that, yeah, it is possible if you already have a background and you have, and you get the dedication, you can at least pick up some basics from maybe a good videotape or a book. It's not going to replace actual instruction from somebody right in front of you, but it's at least a way, way better than what it used to be. So, as somebody who's, you're living in the modern era yourself, like, would you agree that the modern age has given us some advantages in terms of the instructional material that people would not?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I could consider myself very much a dyed-in-the-wool traditionalist. But we live in the 21st century, and there's very useful technology that we can use and take advantage of to improve things. I have an unusual school. I've got students in Estonia and Australia and Netherlands and Poland and Canada and around the U.S. So I'm traveling usually about 90. This year, if it hadn't been for the pandemic, I expected to travel 90,000 miles and get a new record for myself. I actually look forward to the flying part. Those trips will last for really long, down in Australia. But, I just love this art. I want to get it out there, so I'm willing to do that for the students. And but this technology is really useful because I can be meeting with a student who says, I had a question about this technique, and I can do that, and I can take a look at their classes wherever they are and see what they're doing and help them. And we really use technology to deal with the pandemic because we had a lot of things planned for this spring. Amongst them, we rented a castle in Scotland to begin the apprentice training program. Personally, one thing I've noticed over the years is that, eventually we're all going to leave. There's going to be a day that I wake up and go, the alarm goes off at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm supposed to run out to the airport and I think, forget it. That's it. I'm not flying anywhere anymore. I'm going to get sick of it one day and I'm not going to do it anymore. Or, I'm going to do it a lot less. So I want to prepare students to take my place. And there's some guys who already put in some years, and I invited to be in the apprentice program. So 12 of us were going to meet. We rented a castle in Scotland, great place to have it, because we're going to go over my English seminars, and then we were all going to go up there. And of course, we're not obviously that the pandemic put the kibosh on that. So I was just talking with one of the British guys, and I was like, nobody wants to stop training. What are we going to do? And I thought, well, I've never tried these webinar things. Why don't we give that a go? And we started it. We just did a couple of tests, and it was a really great response. I mean, it's amazing when one day I think we had 77, 78 people on at one of the test runs. So I said, all right, and it's quite a different way of teaching, but it's actually surprisingly effective. I have to say that some of the things that I do today, I would have in the past thought, you can't teach martial arts that way. But I have to say I was wrong. I saw that, no, it is effective. As you said, it is not an alternative to actually going and training. But what we're able to do, what we did is we evolved from those webinars into this online academy, the Academy of Chinese Swordsmanship, and I hope you can put the link in. And by the way, we set up for people who are following a sword sage here. If you go to the link and you use the sword sage promo code there, you get 2 months at 50% off. So if you're interested in giving it a try, you're welcome to get it off, give it a try at half off. But what we've found is that we're doing exactly the things we were talking about earlier. We have classes that are just working on the basic cuts. So just take 1 or 2 cuts and look really detail at that cut. Really where you're cutting, how it moves, what part of your body's in, when you use that cut. So basic cuts. And then we're doing different patterns of cuts, different combinations, usually of 3, and how I do these cuts, how they work together, what footwork I use, what's my Duifang doing, why am I responding and moving this way, is this a Duifang who's being more cagey, is it one that's being more aggressive, what techniques work for which kind of people. And so we're getting the footwork down, these combinations down, the basic cuts down. Of course, you're building your strength, and we have classes also just working on footwork, going over footwork techniques. So we do these foundations trainings. That's one set. Then we have Jianfa, and we're also doing it for the Daofa and for the two-handed saber. So there's a whole, really big picture of Chinese swordsmanship. And all of that is geared toward getting back together in person for partner drills and free swordplay. If it's not, it's all aimed toward free swordplay. I tell students all the time, sometimes you see I do the movements smaller and tighter than you see them in the form. That's because I'm teaching you and presenting the techniques as they're used in free swordplay. Nice and tight, how you do that move, how you carve your way in. And it's been really successful. I'm very happy with it. It's continuing to grow. There's over 100 people in the academy now, regular subscribers, and every month it's been growing. And it's very rewarding, and it's honestly also a really great challenge for me. It's interesting to teach when you can't see the students, because I'm standing back there so they can see my full body, and all I see are these little rectangles on the screen. I can't see what the students are doing. So it's a very different way of teaching. And ironically, I'm busier now than I am when I'm traveling, because instead of going every 2 to 3 weekends going away, I'm teaching every weekend. And every weekend, it's got to be creative and really getting the information out there. So it's surprising, ways that traditionalists like myself in the past would say, you can't teach people online. That's ridiculous. You have to be in person. No, I found that actually it does work. It can't, because I've seen the students later, people who I've taught online, or people who looked at the DVD I did and came to me and said, well, I've been working with your DVD for 6 months. Can I come for a private lesson? I say, sure, and they'll come and visit. I think, oh, it's not bad. It's surprisingly good. So I had we shouldn't be dogmatic. If we see something is working, we should adopt, just as we would with swordplay.
You did touch on one of the concerns I had, though, and that's pretty much about two-man drills. Like, martial arts, one of the things that, it's funny, I can see the pros and cons of modern ways of teaching martial arts. Like, one person was like, no, there's no way in hell you can ever learn martial arts from any sort of video or books whatsoever. I'm like, well, are martial arts magic? And he's like, no. I says, are martial arts a special thing that's passed down from aliens? Like, is it only given to
telepathically? He's like, no,
it was passed down by aliens, because then I could just take a pill and get it.
like the Matrix,
like that Matrix thing, just plug it in.
You have a beam in your head,
Where can I get that? That's a lot easier than standing around for an hour.
But I mean, the thing I was trying to say is that it's a human skill. And any human skill can be, we got people in African countries who are learning how to build electronic things just by looking on YouTube and figuring it out on their own. So it's a physical skill. However, the catch is that this happens to be a physical skill that's dependent upon reacting to somebody else. Like a lot of other human knowledge, a lot of other human skills, you pretty much learn it on your own and you do it on your own. And martial arts, as far as practicing it or training your body and getting yourself ready for certain things is one thing. But we're trying to see how well we are able to deal with the responses and movements of another human being. And that's the catch. So that's the one thing I wanted to ask about, what would you say would be a good way to supplement this part that's missing for anybody who wants to learn from the academy or any other form of good martial arts materials to pick up from?
Well, first thing is, you're absolutely right. We don't want to fall back into, hey, it's a lot of fun to learn all these different techniques, and you're practicing them, and you're looking, I can use Liu this way, and I can use Liu that way, and it works well with combination of this technique and that technique, and okay, I changed my step here. That's all interesting, just like a chess player, though, who studies those setups and those formations and how they work and how they interact. It's interesting. I think it's intellectually stimulating, because it's a strategy problem, And so, but we don't want to go down that rabbit hole and not come back out. So absolutely, everything that we're doing is geared toward getting back together for full contact, free swordplay. That's the goal. Producing swordsmen, Genka, not producing people who know thousands of techniques and can show them and they look groovy. That's not the goal at all. So what we're looking to do, the next, as the Academy is building, from the beginning, it's been part of our plan, that start to meet with small groups. So that's in the next phase that will begin after the first of the year. You're just kind of wrapping up. Christmas time is coming, so people are not as active. But our next step is that you meet with the groups. So there's a group here that has 6, 8 people, whatever, and you start working through the basic 2-person drills with them. At first, checking on them individually, making sure that their sword's in the right position, that they're cutting properly, and so on. Check the technique, and then start doing the 2-person drills. And so we're absolutely very much building toward in a year's time or whenever it is that we can start to travel freely again without the concerns. Boom, we're right back to it.
Something that just occurred to me, just an idea that's floated in my head. Would you also be willing to work with other schools as well that might be willing to kind of refresh their sword program?
I work with other schools all the time. I have Chen style guys who not interested in Yang style Taiji Chuan at all. That's great. I mean, I've had teachers from other schools come up and say to me, I really love your seminars. It's really good, but I got to be honest with you and tell you that I plan to take everything that I'm learning from you and renovate my system. And I'm like, great, that's fantastic. Thank you. Do it. Because that, obviously, some people do Bagua, some people do Shaolin Tren. Whatever you get it in. If you really like Shaolin Tren and it's working for you, I'm not going to try to talk you out of that, talk you into Taiji Tren. If somebody else is a Xingyi, I've got several of my most senior guys are Xingyi teachers. And we're constantly, I always say the reason they can't beat me is because I move too slow for them. We're constantly these jokes going back and forth, like Xingyi guys are always the bad guys in the movies, so, it's always this kind of banter, between us, so we're kidding each other. I'm very happy to teach the Xingyi guys. I don't, and they're different Xingyi lineages. There's not one Xingyi lineage.
There's several actually.
So, and my students are from different Xingyi lineages, and it doesn't matter. We're just martial arts brothers together and sisters. I don't care if you're a man or a woman. I don't care what age you are. I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care who you're going out with on Saturday night. You come to the school and we'll do everything I can to teach you because I love this art and I want to do everything I can to share it with as many people as I can. That's my goal. And that's why, the academy is, this online academy is going great because I've got students in new places now, places like Mexico, Greece, Czechoslovakia, and I can appreciate, especially Eastern European people from outside the United States, they might not have as much free income as we have. And so for a guy, let's say, who's in Greece, well, I'm teaching in Poland and Netherlands and the UK and up in Estonia. That's Europe, but it's pretty far from Greece. For a guy there to go, well, let me fly to Leeds for the weekend, see if this guy's any good. That's kind of hard. It's a lot to expect.
Yeah,
it's hundreds of dollars to fly there. You got to hold the fee for the seminar is like the least of it, and in this big scheme, it's only fair that guy can see now. Oh, hey, does this guy? He's got a good rep, but is it for real? Hey, let him check it out. He can come to the thing. The thing is $45 a month if you do the full Monty everything. If you do a focus track, it's only $29 a month. So I think that's very reasonable. So those guys can learn it, and then if they develop it, then maybe I'll go to Greece. I'd love to go to Greece. It's beautiful. I've never been there. It looks beautiful. Go to Mexico. We can start and build. And then in any school, let's be honest, I've always said to my students, don't judge a school by one student you meet from that school. You might have met their best guy who just, bangs you around the room. You're like, man, those guys are really good. That might be the only good guy from that school, right? Or you might meet a guy, there's people, in all honesty, I've had students who were good guys, I like them and all, but they just never got you know?
Mm.
And, you know, they're welcome to train, but they never reached a high level of skill. I wouldn't want you to judge my school by that guy, right? You gotta look at the whole school, right? So every school has the spectrum of students, right? I mean, that's everywhere, just to be honest, right? Not all my classmates are good. A lot of my classmates are terrible, to be honest. I've got classmates who are phenomenal, and I've got classmates who are like, oh my God. Right? You know, we've all got that. So, but by having this global connection now, students, like, it's funny that, you know, sometimes on online, the students in Alaska know the students in Estonia, and, you know, the Polish guys are coming to the UK, but it's those people who are willing to eat bitter, those few people, and then we're able to get all those people come together, and they come together for trainings, and then you have really, really good training because the level is stepped up, because everybody who's there has put in their work before, and really wants to practice the art, you know. And so we have stuff, we have the public seminars, have the seminars that are, you know, smaller, tight-knit groups for the apprentice students, and we invite people, if somebody builds their skill level and they show that they're earnest, boom, they can come in. One of my other apprentice students says, I've got this student's been with me 2 or 3 years, he's really working hard, I'd like to bring him to the next retreat. I'll say, yeah, bring him along. So we, you know, this is and that's something that we can do that's quite different than today. You know, it used to be, you could be a very famous martial artist, you might be extremely, you know, level of skills off the charts, but you're teaching in, you know, Oshkosh, you know, or someplace in the middle of nowhere, because that's where you live, and so you have very few students, and then very, very small opportunity to produce people of exceptional skill, because you have a small pool. Now, I mean, I've literally got students, and I hope this, I don't mean to sound boastful or bragging at all, because it's not my intention, but now I have students like, you know, really all around the globe, and that allows, oh, hey, those guys from here, we can put all those guys together. Man, it's really fantastic training, and then I can feel like, okay, one day I can retire because those guys are going to take over. And that is my goal too. Absolutely, my goal is that, you know, one day they don't need me to fly around the world.
Yeah, they got it themselves, and it's that, I think, is one of the really good things about a kind of modern. I know there are arguments about the globalization of the world, and I got my own critiques on some of the things, but one of the things I really do like is the fact that more and more people are realizing that human is human, and there is this sort of sharing of cultures now, where it's like it's almost like that Bruce Lee thing of taking a little bit of this, a little bit of that, making it your own. I mean, right now, just think of the hilariousness of this. Right now, we have a melanin-saturated dude speaking to someone who doesn't have as much melanin, talking about a culture that we weren't born in, but we have a deep passion for, and talking about the people all around the world who also have that passion, all those other different cultures, all sharing it, who all want to come together to share in that. And there is a beauty in that.
I know it's absolutely fantastic, and I think you're right. I think it's maybe one thing might be a little really easier for us Americans because we don't have as much culture. Like if you're French, I mean, you have a tremendous culture, or even Chinese, you know, and sometimes that's a little bit of a weight, you know, you're molded by that culture. I think we Americans, and I may be wrong about this, but I think we're maybe a little bit more irreverent and we don't have as much sort of weight of, you know, 1,000 years of traditional culture. And so that allows us, you know, a Jersey boy like me to become a Gen cut, you know. And I think this is really good. But if I may, just another thing I think we have to really address with this is there is still a lot of racism in Chinese martial arts. Really, we have to be honest about this. I have heard more than once people speaking about me say, never to my face, of course, well, he can't be good at Chinese swordsmanship. He's not Chinese. How can he understand it? And I say, no, that's of course ridiculous. I understand Chinese swordsmanship, but whether I do or I don't, it's because of the hard work I put in and the time the training, good training with qualified teachers, not just learning it from them, and training it myself and testing myself and continuing to learn. That's why I have any skills that I have, not because of the color of my skin. If somebody were to say to you, you couldn't possibly be any good at German longsword. I mean, you've got too many African genes to be good at German longsword. If somebody said you can't be good at European swordsmanship because your skin is brown, we would immediately call that person a racist. And they would be a racist to say that. But one of my students, who's a Xingyi teacher, shared something of mine and said that I was the foremost teacher of Chinese swordsmanship. And the response was, I find it questionable that some white dude is the foremost teacher of Chinese swordsmanship. It wasn't, well, why do you think that guy is? Or I think maybe this other guy is better. It was, I couldn't be because this color is not the right color for that.
You're just dismissed out of hand.
Right, and I think this is something in most other martial arts, they've gotten past this. But I think we still need to pay attention to this in Chinese martial arts. I years ago was talking to one of the publishers of one of the major magazines in our country here, Chinese martial arts magazines. I'll just leave the name out for the time. And he said to me, I said, why do you just put this guy on the cover? He said, well, we have to put Chinese people on the cover. He said, if we don't put Chinese, he himself, of course, is ethnically Chinese. And he said, if we don't put Chinese people on the cover, we'll get in trouble with the Chinese community. And I said, if you're deciding who goes on the cover of your magazine based on the color of their skin, that's racism. And he said, well, yeah, you're right, but we have to do that. He didn't put somebody on the cover, and he even said to me, he said, well, the most skilled Hungar guys that I know are black guys and Puerto Rican guys from New York City. I said, well, why don't you put them on the cover then? Because they're not Chinese. See? So I think we really have to address this. Judge a martial artist by the content of his character and the skill in his hands, not by the color of his skin.
Yeah, that's a hump that we're going to have to go over, have to get over on a lot of different fronts, not just Chinese martial arts, but you do bring up a really good point. That's definitely a good point. It's a bad symptom of an even bigger disease.
Absolutely. And let's clean up our own house.
Yeah, right? I agree with you.
Before we start pointing fingers at other people else, let's clean up our house.
Yeah,
and then
I agree with you on that. I definitely agree with you on that. And that is a really good point that I'm glad you brought up. It's just kind of funny that we're, to sort of end this off, and man, we can talk about this for another 2 hours, I think. But
yes.
It's kind of funny that throughout this entire conversation, we kept looking at both sides of the issue. And all this is cemented on our love for a weapon that has two sides.
Right.
There's a kind of poetry there. It was like I would bring up one thing, or you'd bring up something and say, well, there's this aspect of it.
It's all about this, right?
Yeah, it's all about this. Pretty much. It all goes right back to that. Well, as much as I want to keep this going, considering that my equipment is now running out of batteries and stuff, I'm afraid we're going to have to put it up.
No one's going to listen this long anyway.
You'd be surprised. I used to think that nobody would like long form stuff. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to stick around for
it. Well, we can get together again anytime. And you should come here to Virginia for a visit. We'll show you some cool stuff.
When I'm finally able to get the time, considering, certain viruses have kind of messed things up.
As soon as that's passed, you're welcome to visit, and we'll pick up on all of these things.
Yeah, sounds like it'll be great. But I want to thank you very much for willing to spend the time with me to answer these questions and to, explain a few things from your perspective and your side of things, displaying your experience in the arts here, showing off your viewpoints. It's been very enlightening. I'm sure that the listeners here have quite a bit to, chew on, mentally speaking.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that, whoever's listening to this, that they're able to get a lot out of it. I certainly did. And I really thank you for your time. I know it's valuable.
And I also enjoyed it. And, we've had a chance to talk a few times before. And I know it seems our ideas are pretty sympathetic. I'm sure we're going to one of these days bump into some that aren't. But that's if I paraphrase that old, the Chinese saying, all men are brothers. And so it's always great to meet somebody else who shares a passion.
Right. Right, so,
all right, take care. We'll see you soon. Everybody stay strong.
everyone stay strong, stay training, and catch you guys later.
Very good. 再见.
Again.